Hello, my name is Jennifer Cox. I am from the Department of French and Italian at Indiana University, Bloomington. And today I'm going to be talking about revitalizing languages with social stigma, specifically prestige planning in Picard. So, as people who work with endangered languages, we know that language revitalization efforts see a lot of different kinds of challenges. And sometimes those challenges are made even more difficult for languages that have social stigma. So, when there's a stigma surrounding a minority language, especially that is spoken. So, how do we reverse this kind of social stigma to help revitalization efforts? One of the best ways to do that is through prestige planning activities. And today we're going to look at recent prestige planning efforts in Picard, which is a minority language in France that has recently entered schools this school year. So it's an emerging situation. A lot of different new things are happening. And specifically, we're going to look at input from Picard instructors and activists who are sort of spearheading these prestige planning efforts during this new time for Picard. So we can see here on this map, Picard is spoken in the northernmost region of France called Hauts-de-France, right next to Belgium. So we know that language attitudes are critical for language maintenance, and of course they influence the success of language revitalization efforts. It is very difficult to revitalize a language when the community doesn't want it revitalized for whatever reason. And prestige, minority languages are often stigmatized because they are competing with a sort of prestige variety, a dominant majority language that the community is sort of shifting to. So we know, of course, that many minority languages have been purposely minoritized when people are punished for speaking it, especially in schools. There are also situations where the community just decides that they would rather their kids speak this other prestige variety for whatever reason. They think their kids will have more opportunities if they speak that language. So in these different situations, the community starts to shift to the majority language, and we need revitalization efforts to bring that language back to its former position. So because language revitalization requires a desire to speak the language on the part of the community members, and we especially need them to teach that language to their children, how do communities create that desire to continue speaking the language when the language has been stigmatized for whatever reason? So one of the best ways to do this is through activities in prestige planning. So prestige planning activities aim to influence how the language is perceived, both by speakers and non-speakers, and the respect that's accorded to it. So prestige planning is a type of language policy and planning. So we can see here on the right, sort of a traditional framework of different goals in language policy and planning, status planning, such as creating an official language, official status for a language, acquisition planning, teaching the language in schools, that sort of thing, corpus planning, creating an orthography, terminology, those kinds of things. So that's sort of a traditional framework. Harmon 1990 really pointed out that language planning also has, well, it has these productive actions. It also has sort of a receptive side. So for example, the way that speech communities accept or reject the planning efforts, status and corpus, et cetera, planning efforts that have been carried out. So he really emphasized prestige planning as sort of a receptive element that is really important in language planning. So he sort of pointed out these 4 different levels of prestige planning activities. These are activities carried out by individuals, groups, agencies, and the government. And he lists those from least to most impactful. But of course, it is necessary to have prestige planning at all 4 of these levels to have a really successful prestige planning efforts. So as I mentioned today, we're going to be looking at the case study of Picard. So Picard is first of all, it's a stigmatized minority language in France. It is a oil Gallo-Romance language, so it is basically in the same immediate language family as French. It has about 700,000 speakers, 500,000 of which are in France. The others are in neighboring Belgium. And unfortunately for Picard and a lot of other regional languages, France has historically not been very kind to regional and minority languages within its borders. It tends to have homogenizing language policies that really emphasize the speaking of French, standard French. But even policies that have supported regional languages have sort of left Picard to the side. They've ignored Picard. So, for example, Basque, Breton, Corsican, these kind of languages have been taught in France in public schools, for example, since about the 70s. Some of them even have immersion schools, but that has not been the case with Picard. So, why is this the case? Well, Picard is stigmatized, partly because it is so close to French. It is not mutually comprehensible with French, but it is often seen as bad French because it's close enough. They have some lexical items in common, and it is sort of just seen as this deformed French. Even though Picard did not evolve out of French. It evolved alongside French as an adjacent Romance language. But because the Parisian, as you can see, Paris is down here, the blue is where Picard has traditionally been spoken. And because the Parisian variety of French was the one chosen as the standard, the language chosen as the official language of France, the neighboring Picard language has just been deemed too close to French to be sort of a real language. So for this reason, it has traditionally not been taught in public schools, at least officially. So we'll talk more about that in a moment, but it has not traditionally been in schools. So for these reasons, people aren't necessarily proud to speak Picard. They often don't even think that they speak another language. They think they just grew up speaking some sort of deformed French that they have needed to correct in school, basically, had to learn to correct. So why is this? Here are some stereotypes surrounding Picard. Picard is spoken by blue-collar workers in rural areas. The people are unsophisticated. They drink a lot. A lot of these stereotypes have sort of been popularized in a very, very famous film in 2008 called Bienvenue chez les Ch'tis. The English translation of the title is Welcome to the Sticks. So that kind of gives you an idea of what this movie's about. But it's basically, it's a comedy about people who live in this region. And it's all in good humor, but it has popularized a lot of the stereotypes from this region, as the people are sort of friendly but uneducated, and most of all, they talk funny. So as you can see in this screenshot from the English translation, I waved to you to stop, you didn't shee me. There's a lot of sh sound in Picard. And so that's how they've kind of rendered this accent in English. But it's basically seen as sort of a comical language spoken in an area with relatively uneducated people. So bad French, basically, is the stereotype associated with this area. However, in December 2021, there was a memorandum passed from the Ministry of Education in France that really was a game changer for Picard revitalization. So the Ministry of Education added Picard to the list of minority languages that are allowed to be taught in public schools. This was a very big deal for Picard because it had never been recognized, sort of legitimized in this way before. And it only made this list. There was actually a previous version of the list that had been published, and Picard was not on the list. And so there was a petition signed, and they finally got Picard added to the list. So it was a very big deal. And this school year, 2022-23, is the first time that Picard is officially allowed in public schools. However, it's sort of made it's only in a few schools to begin with, so it's only in 2 elementary schools and 4 middle schools this first year, and only for 1 hour a week. So it's really a slow start, but a very big step for Picard language revitalization. So given this change in the situation, I came up with a couple of questions. First of all, I wanted to know, given that Picard it's long been stigmatized both in and outside the community, which prestige planning actors, individuals, groups, agencies, and government have contributed to the recent change in educational policy? So what have they been doing in the prestige planning world that may have contributed to this radical change in approach? And now that Picard is entering schools, do Picard speakers have positive attitudes towards the impact it will have on public perception of Picard? So to answer these questions, I sent out an online Qualtrics questionnaire with qualitative and quantitative questions, and I circulated that among Picard instructors and activists. And I also carried out some semi-structured sociolinguistic interviews with some Picard speakers, 2 for right now, but it's an ongoing project, so I'm still doing some interviews. But the instructors and the activists have given me so much information on these questions and the prestige planning efforts that have been carried out. So if we look first at individuals and groups, what have they been doing to further prestige planning in Picard? So first of all, if we look at individuals, there are different kinds of individuals that can make an impact in prestige planning. There are, for example, authors. So I spoke to one author who writes books in Picard. And one of the things that he really underlined was the importance of writing about contemporary themes in Picard. So one problem he told me was that if you want to learn Picard, you don't have a lot of ways to practice reading, ways to be exposed to the language in text, because basically all the books that exist are sort of older. They're about regional folk tales. There's not a lot of contemporary literature in Picard. So his main passion was to write sort of contemporary books about social issues and things that really affect modern French people, but write about them in Picard. So that is what he does. His situation was especially interesting because he learned Picard as a child from his grandparents, sort of did not continue speaking Picard at all. And later on in life, he decided to relearn Picard. And that's sort of what showed him that there were not a lot of Picard materials to practice with. So he has been contributing to the prestige of Picard by writing contemporary literature in that language. There you go. So that's one example for individuals. Another example of individuals contributing to prestige planning are instructors who sort of have independent efforts toward prestige planning. So for example, there's one instructor who organizes an after-school Picard language club. So kids voluntarily get together after school and he teaches them some words, some grammar, some stories in Picard, and they sort of learn the language that way. So that's another way that individuals have made an impact in prestige planning. So if we look at the groups, first of all, we can see here this picture on the right. This is a marionette theater group. So in the region where Picard is traditionally spoken, these marionette shows have also traditionally been going on. And this has really been a important part of culture in the region. And it continues even today. There are much fewer marionette theaters than there were 100 years ago. But an example of the way that these sort of groups contribute to prestige planning. This character, this puppet on the right in the red outfit. So this puppet, sort of his character, is known for, he can only speak Picard. He doesn't speak French, and his wife here on the left has to translate everything he says into French. And that's sort of the joke of the stories that he's in. So this is kind of a way where the Picard language is kind of integrated into the story and sort of is continued in these marionette shows. Another example of groups that impact prestige planning, there is a sort of committee for the creation of new Picard words, and they get together. And I believe anyone who speaks Picard is welcome. They get together and they basically have a topic, some modern topic that doesn't traditionally have terminology in Picard, and they sit down and they create new terms for items in this topic in Picard. So of course, this is important for the legitimacy of a minority language, because a language is really only seen as a true language if you can say everything you need to say on any topic in that language. And so to make sure that this can occur in Picard, this group gets together and creates new Picard words for that purpose. So that is another way that groups are contributing to prestige planning. So next we have really the main player in prestige planning activities in Picard, and that is the Picard Language Agency. So this agency is funded in part by the regional government, and it is basically the main way that prestige planning activities are planned for the Picard language. It's basically their sole job is to create these sort of events that sort of promote the Picard language. So for example, just a few examples of the activities that they create. We have the annual Picard Literature Prize. So every year they have a contest and basically give a prize to someone who created the best literature in Picard that year. They also have an initiative called My Town Loves Picard. And it's basically mayors can sign an agreement that they are going to promote the Picard language in some way by changing the town sign or adding a Picard translation to the town sign and ticking a certain number of other boxes. And they sort of get this designation as My Town Loves Picard. They've also been doing what they call interventions in schools, where they basically have workshops that teach kids, basic Picard words and things like that, which was really important, of course, and is still important before the Picard was allowed in schools to be taught officially. So these are just some of the things that they do that have been really important for prestige planning. Now for the government has been less active in promoting Picard, of course. Really the only thing that they have done is the most recent recognition of Picard as a language to be taught in schools. I suppose you could say that the agency, the Picard Language Agency, is kind of the government, since it is funded by the regional government. But this is how agencies and governments have contributed to prestige planning. So a note on speaker attitudes. Now that Picard's entering schools, do Picard speakers have positive opinions toward the impact that will have on the public perception of Picard? So yes, the attitudes have been mostly positive toward introducing Picard in schools, but there's also been a lot of skepticism. So there are some issues that a lot of minority languages face. For example, standardization. Now that Picard is in schools, which Picard are you going to teach? Are we going to create a standard Picard? Are we choosing a certain variety? These kind of questions. There's also the question of teacher training, training teachers to actually teach these Picard lessons in schools. And that has been a big struggle in the beginning, of course, but they are working on that. One very interesting suggestion by an instructor was to introduce prestige planning in schools before introducing language instruction. So, for example, she is part of an initiative that is introducing Picard culture into regular subject courses in schools in the region before they actually have Picard classes. So, for example, they are in PE class, they're playing traditional Picard board games. In math class, they're learning to count to 10 in Picard. These kinds of things. The marionettes make an appearance. So these kind of things are sort of laying the groundwork for the students to recognize a regional Picard culture and sort of give them a desire to learn the language of their region. So to conclude, which prestige planning actors have contributed to the recent change in educational policy? Well, especially individuals, groups, and agencies have contributed, but as Harman notes, a combination of efforts from these four levels are necessary for successful prestige planning, and they really all have been at work in Picard. As we've seen, prestige planning is absolutely necessary for revitalization of stigmatized languages. Picard is no exception. But will these efforts lead to successful revitalization in Picard? Really, only time will tell, because we are still at the beginning of revitalization efforts in Picard, and only time will tell where this prestige planning takes us. So thank you so much for listening.